It's now 13:45. This was a regular meeting. I might start a little later, but time's of the essence this week. I want to give you all greetings. My name is Tyrone Sims II. I co-chair the DNC's Veterans and Military Families Council, along with my co-chair, Sue Hoppin, who will introduce herself after my remarks. I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here, especially this week, because I don't know about you, but I paid my own way to get here. I think y'all did too. So God bless all of us. I'm not going to go into introduction to who I am. You can Google that, whatever. Check your pocket, Library of Congress, aka your phone. But I am thankful for y'all for being here today. It's going to be a very, very, very interesting and maybe even fun meeting for people who like these kind of things that you'll understand later as the meeting transpires. The DNC Veterans and Military Families Council, or VMFC for short, as you will learn today and Thursday, is unique amongst our sister DNC councils and caucuses, in that the strength of our council resides in the activism and energy of our leaders at the state, party, and local jurisdictional committee levels. For too long, the GOP has laid claim to veterans, our nation's defense, and all things patriotic. That is and always has been BS. As my former Congressman Jim Moran once said, if you want to know how much your elected officials care about the issues you care about, see how they vote on appropriations on those issues. Republicans have spent decades attempting to gut the VA. They don't vote yes on VA appropriations. And as you all know, the Trump administration was attempting to privatize the VA. Understand that the VMFC has been working directly with the campaign since day one. Let me clarify. We were fully supporting the Biden-Harris campaign, canvassing, phone banking, crafting policy, you name it, for over a year. When the campaign transitioned to Harris-Walz, because we've been on the ground doing the grunt work that wins elections, there was no adjustment. We kept on doing what we do, and we'll win this election for Vice President Harris. Our constituency is a middle swing population of roughly 22.7 million voting age Americans that has been leaning left in the past 3 presidential election cycles. Robust engagement presents a rare constituency that can move swing states that are overrepresented in the general population in states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina. The VMF constituency constitutes roughly 8% of voters nationally, and more so in the battleground states. As stated, the GOP has laid claim to veterans, military personnel, and their families based on appeals to patriotism or denigration of Democratic candidates in our platform. Because the demographics and voting tendencies of military families and younger veterans have been shifting to the left, we are capitalizing on this swing with proper focus and investment. Democrats have a strong appeal to our community based on strong, pragmatic, principled foreign policy, for example, support for NATO and Ukraine. Also, support for service members, veterans, and their families, the PACT Act, and funding for caregivers. In opposition to privatization of veterans' health care. Engaging the VMF constituency blunted GOP attacks and quantifiably contributed to the Obama-Biden and Biden-Harris victories in 2008, 2012, and 2020. The bottom line is, when Democratic veterans and military families are fully engaged, our candidates win. This fact alone is why Kamala Harris will serve as our next commander-in-chief. Thank you. Come on, Sue. Huh? Oh, I didn't do the pledge. That's my fault. I lived the pledge, so I apologize for that. Who wants to, actually, this is a flowing meeting. Who wants to deliver the pledge for the group? I do. Come on up. Thank you.
How about I just leave? We all do it together.
There you go.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
follow Tyrone or the Pledge of Allegiance, but I guess my role is to just tap dance until our first speaker gets here. So I want to just harken back. Were you guys there on the floor last night? That was amazing. The energy was so cool. But do you remember one thing that really struck with me, especially in our realm of military families and veterans, is when Governor Beshear said that the Republicans want to divide us, right? They want to measure the value of a veteran. They want to determine who is a veteran, who is a military family. And I think the big difference between us and them is that we don't want to measure. Our table has enough room for everyone. And so as our state directors go out there and do their work, I am so thrilled that they're here because they're doing the hard work on the ground, and I know the spirit that they move through is that they are very inclusive. They've been very inclusive into getting more visibility into the installations by embracing our military families, so that it helps them, like, you know, broaden the table and bring more people in. That means that now we have, along with our veterans, we have babies and puppies and spouses canvassing, which I'm told is very effective because nobody can say no to a puppy or a baby. So I think it's really great in that, you know, involving Democrats in veterans issues and military family issues is that we're proving to Republicans and Americans that we can be effective and we can do so with heart, right? And that includes everybody. And I think we also have to remind our veteran military family populations that your veteranness or your military spouseness is not gauged by what service you did. Everybody's service matters. And every family matters and every ally matters because, you know, when less than 1% of the population serves and less than 8% have ever served, we can't do this in a silo. We need our neighbors, we need our friends, we need the people that we sit next to in church and at schools and at the PTA. We need everybody to elect Kamala Harris as president. And we need to do our part. I know you guys have done so much for the country already, and it's like you're being asked to do it again. But, you know, as all the speakers said last night, we're in the fight for our lives, right? We're not fighting Republicans or Democrats. We're fighting democracy versus fascism. And you guys understand this all too well. You're the Americans that understand this better than anybody else. So I thank you for everything you're doing. I thank you for being here with us today, and I'm really looking forward to a great meeting. Thanks, guys.
Oh, that's true. I just asked, am I giving a report or am I tap dancing? And Tyrone reminded me that sometimes they're one and the same.
Now the tap dance starts.
Oh, now the tap dance starts.
So he's lucky Melissa's Air Force, because, you know, flexibility is the key to air power. You're just lucky.
Melissa's Army.
I'm Army. I don't know
Oh
what
my
you're
God,
talking
Jack,
about.
get up here.
Oh, damn.
So the way this meeting's gonna go, I don't know how all the other meetings went. We have a lot of elected officials and people who care about our issue set coming to meet, and so as you know, as those persons come, we pause, allow them to speak, they go, we fill in, etc. So in this case, I do believe Governor Kelly is here to, Senator Kelly is here to
Cool.
provide remarks.
Cool.
Come on up, sir.
Hello, everybody. How we doing today? Are we winning? Well, thank you. Thank you for the welcome. Thank you for being here in Chicago. And thank you so much for the invitation. It is always great to be surrounded by folks who understand the sacrifices made by our veterans and our military families. We all join the military for different reasons. Some are looking for an opportunity to learn some skills and get an education. For others, it's something that they just grew up with. And some are just drawn to it for reasons that we sometimes can't even explain. For me, it was a combination of those things. My grandfathers both served in World War II, one in the Merchant Marine in the Atlantic, and the other in the U.S. Navy in the Pacific. My parents were both cops, My dad was in the Army, before that, in the 82nd Airborne. And I grew up knowing that I wanted to serve somehow. I also felt it was sort of an obligation. Now, if you grow up in New Jersey and your last name is Kelly, you're basically expected to be a cop or a firefighter. But my brother and I, we both wanted to fly airplanes in the Navy. Now, one of America's greatest strengths is that we have an all-volunteer military. It really is. It sets us apart. And it underpins the discipline and dedication that makes our military so effective. Folks come from all over our country with all different kinds of backgrounds to serve. Republicans, Democrats, independents. We've all served alongside folks of different political stripes and some who aren't political at all. What matters is that we are all soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and now guardians. But more than that, it's that we're Americans. Some Republicans like to think that their political party has a monopoly on patriotism. That's not the case. No political party does. But in this election, it's pretty clear to me, I'm sure clear to you, which presidential candidate supports service members and veterans and which one does not. It was under Kamala Harris's and Joe Biden's leadership that we passed the PACT Act. This was the largest expansion of veterans' health care in decades. And it's this administration's Department of Veterans Affairs that has rolled out this program rather successfully. Already, more than 5.7 million veterans have been screened for toxic exposures. Now that's government working the way it should, supporting veterans. Those are Kamala Harris's values. We all know that Donald Trump does not understand that. This is the guy who spat on the legacy of Senator John McCain, a hero of mine whose Senate seat I am currently in. Donald Trump has called veterans who have paid the ultimate price suckers and losers. Just this past week, he said that the Civilian Presidential Medal of Freedom was better than the Medal of Honor because Medal of Honor recipients, now these are his words, not mine, because Medal of Honor recipients are either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets or they're dead. The VFW, of which I'm a member, called these comments asinine. I agree. Now, we've heard this kind of stuff from Donald Trump plenty of times, a lot. But here's the question, why does he say things like this about those of us who have laid down their lives to serve our country? It's kind of puzzling. I think it's because the concept of putting someone else before himself is so foreign to Donald Trump that he believes it's something that you have to be conned into. He's a convicted felon who spent his career stiffing people. And that's how he sees the world. You're either the con man or you're getting conned. There's no other option for him. He thinks people are tricked into joining the military, tricked into risking their lives for our country. He doesn't understand us. When I was flying over Iraq during the first Gulf War, my first combat mission, and I had a surface-to-air missile lock onto my airplane, my very first time in combat, I didn't think to myself, how did I get tricked into this? And I'll never forget when I said to my bombardier navigator, a guy named Paul Fujimura, that we have a missile coming right at us. And the only thing he said to me is he says, "Roger, I'm tracking the target." So I wasn't sure he heard me, but he's looking at the radar and the infrared sensor in the airplane, and I said to him, "Paul, did you hear, we have a missile coming right at us?" And again, his only response was, "Roger, I'm tracking the target." Eventually, I have to do this last-ditch maneuver, roll the airplane upside down. I put the stick in my lap, full power. Missile flies over the top of us, explodes. Airplane shakes. Get the airplane heading back towards the target. By the way, you know what's worse than seeing the first missile? Seeing the second one. And we go through this whole thing again, and eventually we get our bombs on the target, a place called Shaiba Airfield, Basra, southern Iraq. But my point is that Paul was focused on the mission. He trusted me to do my job, and I trusted him to do his. It's what service members do. And our only reward was that we would destroy the target and maybe get home safe. That's the excellence of the U.S. military. That's what sets us apart. And that is something that Donald Trump just does not understand. Now, we have an opportunity to elect somebody who understands this, Kamala Harris. And there is a lot that you guys can do to help. A lot. Your voice matters. A tremendous amount. It really does, especially in this election right now against somebody who just doesn't get it. And there is so much energy this week. Energy at the United Center here, energy in Glendale like I had never seen before at any political event, 15,000 people in a room. Never experienced anything like that. And I've been through this with other folks running for president. I've never seen anything like that. But now the key is we've got to turn that energy into votes. So I need you to continue to be involved. Your ability to tell your stories, to share your perspective on what this choice means between Donald Trump, a relic from the past, and Kamala Harris, who can lead this country into the future. It matters now more than ever. So thank you. And let's accomplish this mission together, and let's make sure that Kamala Harris is our next commander-in-chief. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Cosmic Row, you're up.
Hey, my friends and fellow veterans. I'm Congressman Jason Crow from the great state of Colorado. Do we have any Coloradans in the house? You see a few folks here. Thank you so much to the co-chairs for your leadership in helping convene the whole group, and to all of you. You know, it is one of the greatest honors always to be in a room with my fellow veterans, because we understand as Senator Kelly just so eloquently put it, what service is really about. Right? We learned from our first days in boot camp or basic training this notion of servant leadership. That if you're a leader and if you have the honor to be entrusted with the lives of our fellow veterans, with our nation's sons and daughters, which is one of the greatest honors, but also hefty responsibilities that any person can be entrusted in. We understand that ultimately we are a servant of the nation and those people. You know, when I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, we have any paratroopers out there? Any All-Americans out there? What happens when you're in that airplane? Who jumps first? Right? The highest ranking person in the plane jumps first. And then others follow. This is the notion that Donald Trump doesn't understand. It's the notion that he can't understand. Because it is all about him. And can we imagine somebody of that mentality being once again the commander-in-chief? We saw what life was like under a President Trump. We lived through that. We saw the nepotism, the greed, the irresponsibility, the cavalier manner in which he treated our fellow veterans, and the heavy responsibility entrusted upon him. Well, we won't let it happen again. Because time and time again in American history, it's veterans who understand that when we raise that right hand and take the oath, it's a lifetime oath. We may hang up the boots and put our uniform in the closet, but it doesn't change the oath. We live it, we breathe it until the day that we die. And we'll do anything to fulfill it, so long as we can walk and breathe. So that is our responsibility. And as leaders, we never get to choose our time. I'm going to talk briefly about our moment. Throughout American history, there have been a handful of consequential moments that have decided the trajectory of our nation. And we are in one now. And when you're living in those moments, you oftentimes don't realize it. But we are in one of those moments where we can go one of two very different directions. I know you know this. We didn't get to choose that, right? But leaders in consequential moments never get to choose that. The suffragettes didn't choose theirs. The greatest generation didn't ask for it. The Freedom Riders didn't ask for it. You never get to choose your moment. As a leader and as a servant of the people, your only choice is what you're willing to do when that moment calls you. When brothers and sisters, you have done it before. And I know you're here because you are answering that call again. This is our moment. This is our country. Our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers are counting on us to stand up and serve once again. And I couldn't be more proud to call you brothers and sisters and know that we are going to get the job done and we are going to answer the call for our nation. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Congressman Crow, for your remarks. And next, we'll have Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
afternoon, Democrats. I am amazed how, in classic veteran fashion, everybody is awake and sharp after being up past our bedtimes and up earlier than you can think. I haven't been through this, never mind range day, I haven't been through this kind of sleep deprivation since our kids were kind of pre-sleep training. And yet the energy is palpable. You can feel it right now. Right? Can't you just feel the vibes, otherwise known as morale, is off the charts right now in the Democratic Party. And I'm so excited to have a moment just to speak first and foremost to say thank you for your service. And to join you in remembering that the only appropriate thing to say about the service of another veteran from a veteran to a veteran is thank you for your service. And our friends on the other side need a little reminding of that right now. Look, I remember what it was like when there was something kind of exotic about the idea of people who care about national security, felt strongly about national security, and served, revealing that they were Democrats. And there have even been times when in progressive and Democratic circles, you felt like you had to kind of think twice about whether to reveal yourself to be a veteran or somebody who believed in strong national security. But we have changed that season in which Republicans somehow tried to monopolize the idea of patriotism as if the flag belonged to a political party, and remind everybody that there is nothing partisan, no party owns patriotism in this country. We're reclaiming a lot of that ground. Just like we've reminded our friends that God does not belong to a political party in the United States of America. And just like we Democrats have rightly leaned into the importance of freedom as what we are about, because sometimes our conservative friends talk and think about freedom as if government was the only thing that could make you unfree, as if all there was to freedom was freedom from regulations or corporate taxes. But we know, especially those who have served know, that it takes a lot more than that to secure freedom. It's true in our domestic policy, that you're not free if you don't have the infrastructure to get you clean water and a road to where you're going. That you're not free if you fear that the next health care bill could bankrupt your family. That's about freedom too. And you're definitely not free as a woman in this country if some politician gets to tell you what your health care choices ought to be. But then, freedom around the world, which the Biden-Harris administration has stood up resolutely to defend, and which the Harris-Walz administration will as well. That's what's at stake in things like supporting the fight for freedom in democracy in Ukraine is all about. We don't have to send troops there. We're supporting them so that our troops don't have to be on the front lines of the next fight for freedom and democracy. That's why we stand with NATO. That's why we stand with our allies. That's why we stand with our friends. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and Democrats up and down the ticket understand that. There's something else that veterans bring to the picture. I was just at another veterans event across town just a little while ago, and wound up seeing a couple of the guys that I had served with, and just felt like, as you know, you're immediately plunged back into your old roles and your old sense of humor, none of which I will repeat from this microphone. But also that sense of trust which is in such short supply in this country, that is built through service, through an authentic understanding that it is all about what you can do to support each other and to support others. Because I'll tell you, anytime we went outside the wire, the people who got into the vehicle with me didn't care whether I was a Democrat or a Republican. They didn't care what country my dad immigrated from. They didn't care whether I was going home to a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They just wanted to know that I'd read the intel briefs on the route and that I knew what to do if we had a problem. And vice versa. We trusted each other with our lives on the strength of a handshake with nothing in common but the flag on our shoulder. We need more of that right now in this country. And we are ready to stand up for more of that. It's what the other side doesn't get. And you can tell from the despicable way that the top of their ticket talks about people who earned the Medal of Honor. The weird way that he talks about the service of others. But there's a through line that goes all the way back to the days when Donald Trump used his status as a teenage multimillionaire to procure a doctor's note to pretend that he was unable to serve so that some working class kid from who knows, maybe the south side of Chicago went to Vietnam in his place. There is an unbroken pattern right there of not being able to grasp service to others. Veterans understand service to others. Today's Democrats understand service to others. Joe Biden understands service to others, which is why the words that rang truest from his speech were that it's not about him, it's about you. He loves his job, but he loves this country more, and did an unbelievable thing, laying aside power and opening the way to a new generation for no other reason than it was the right thing to do. But he has also made it clear, as long as he draws breath, he will back veterans and military families, and a Harris-Walz administration will build on that record. I got to tell you, I've had a lot of emotional moments in Washington, a lot of proud moments in Washington, but the only time I've shed a tear in the East Room of the White House was when I was on hand to be there when President Biden and Vice President Harris marked the signing of the PACT Act that did right by those veterans who were downwind of those burn pits. Couldn't be more different from this Project 2025 and what they're proposing to do that would cut jobs that so many veterans serve in, that would endanger health care. By the way, first time in history I can think of when a major scandal for a political party wasn't a sex scandal, they had one of those too. It wasn't a criminal cover-up, although, it was merely the publication of their own policy plans, right? The policies couldn't be different, but also the leaders couldn't be more different. We've got the right leaders. We've got the right leaders in Kamala Harris, and we got the right leader in Tim Walz. I am excited to have a veteran. I'm excited to have a Midwesterner, but frankly, I'm especially excited to have an NCO on the ticket. I knew back when I was Lieutenant Pete that I wasn't going to get anything right unless the gunny sitting next to me, the Marines loaned to us, was going to have my back, and he always did. An NCO understands service. In fact, the whole through line of Tim Walz's career, what it all has in common is about being there for others. It's the right way to approach being in Congress. It's the right way to approach being governor, but he's been that way his whole career. I have seen so many campaigns, so many parties spend so many millions on consultants and advertising in order to try to make their candidate seem like the kind of guy who would be a football coach and a teacher and a National Guardsman. Tim Walz literally is that guy. He's the real deal. I knew that ever since I met him literally standing next to a life-size butter sculpture at the Minnesota State Fair. What you see is what you get. And what you see is somebody who understands that it's not about him. This is why Donald Trump and J.D. Vance literally can't figure out what to do with him. Because it doesn't compute that you would live and work for others. But that's how it is. His whole career, the measure of a great teacher is the success of their students. The measure of a football coach is the performance of your team. And yes, the measure of a sergeant is the well-being and the readiness and the effectiveness of your soldiers. He understands that, and he will bring that spirit to the White House as America's sergeant. Now also, just as an officer doesn't get very far without a great senior NCO, and a commander doesn't get very far without a really good XO, any of us in politics who have had to figure out how to stay who you are while being out on that stage and serving others needs a spouse who is a rock, who shares their values, and who themselves is an extraordinary leader. And one of the things I'm really enjoying about these last few days and weeks is America getting to know the next Second Lady of the United States, Gwen Walz. A teacher, a leader, somebody who will be a great moral force in this country, in the White House. Please welcome our next Second Lady, Gwen Walz.
afternoon. Thanks so much for having me here. It's not every day that I get to be at the Veterans and Military Families Council. This is something else. So how are you doing? Right? How am I? Thanks for asking. Yeah, thanks for asking. This is all pretty exciting, right? And Tim and I and our children, you know, the ones who put the bunny ears behind him on CNN or MSNBC or whatever it was, we are all honored. And we're so honored by all of you to be able to serve for and with you. We were and are, because once you are, a military family. And I know there are lots of things and you know, lots of terms, and these military terms, you know, I had to think for just a minute, I call him Mayor Pete. When he was saying NCO, I'm like, oh yeah, non-commissioned officer. I'm going back into my things, right, rolling them through my head. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. Very, very special. And to feel that support is really great. But we are a military family and lived through a deployment. I know some of the information that's out there right now makes it seem like Tim may not have been deployed, but he was. And Hope was about 2.5 years old when he was deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which is how we've always talked about it. And I like that word, support, because that was at the time when National Guard hadn't been used in overseas conflicts and wars and all of those sort of places. And so they were just beginning to use the National Guard in that way. Hope was 2.5, and Tim was gone. I don't want to give you the exact days because, you know, someone will count them and say she was short one or long one, but just saying. But he was gone a while. And so I put candy in a jar because Hope was 2.5. And each day we'd take a piece of candy out. And I told her that when the jar was empty, then Dad would be home. And I had to refill that candy jar, but because she was 2.5, she hadn't figured that part of it out yet. She's 23 now, so she would have me on that one. But we would talk about that, and I said, when that jar is empty, then Dad will be home, right? And so many of you and so many military families have served in ways that are so extraordinary. You all have. You all have, and I want to say thank you for your service. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. And so when Tim did come home, and Hope was about 3.5, right, in that summer, and that is when we started asking some real questions about the direction of our country. And we started thinking about what we might do to serve in that way. And so we got involved in trying to elect John Kerry. And that was our first political involvement ever, right? That was our first frame for that. And when John Kerry didn't win, we thought, what does this mean now? What does this mean for our military families, for the National Guard, for the state of the world? What does this mean now? And as we tried to ask what it was that we could do and answer questions about what we could do, we decided that a place that we could do that was in the United States Congress. And that's how we made that decision. And when you want to impact what's happening in places, a way to do that is to impact the funding. And the way you impact the funding is you run for the United States Congress because they're in charge of the money. So that is how we made that decision, like smart teachers focused on service. Thank you very much. I wanted to come today just so you would know who I was too. So you would know that I understand and I hear you and I thank you and I'm honored to serve with you in our next effort here. My name is Gwen, and I am a proud new member of the team, Harris Walz. Woo! Woo! And I'd like to think that you're all a new member of that team too. So thank you. I cannot think of a better team, right, than we have right here. Tim and Kamala have spent their lives fighting for middle-class families, families like the ones they grew up in. Tim signed up for the National Guard just right after his 17th birthday. His dad took him to that field. The farmer got off the tractor because they were the recruiting person too, and they signed up, right? I would like to just tell you two things from my point of view. I think that that was very important to Tim's father, a Korean veteran, for Tim to sign up because his father knew he was dying of cancer. And he was worried about how Tim was going to get through college. And he was thinking about what the military had done for him. And he thought that might be a good thing for Tim too, and a chance to serve in a way for his family, and a chance to get an education. And I only know that because I didn't know Tim's father. I only know that by reading things that he wrote to Tim, and by really looking at personal documents. I also think his dad thought, this is a spirited young man, and basic training might be a really great idea between his junior and senior year. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think it worked out well for him. I think he came back like right before football camp began, and then that was a good use of his energy then. So you know, I'm speaking to the choir right here. So I think that chance for everyone, for every single person to have a chance or an opportunity and chase that American dream was how his father saw Tim's service and signing up in the National Guard. I think together, Kamala and Tim will fight for a future that all of us, all of our sons and daughters and families, no matter how we choose to serve, will have that chance and opportunity. Now, as I said, it's just been a little more than a week that we have joined this effort. And so I wanted a chance to just say in my own words a little bit about who I am, who I think Tim is, and what our service has been about. So, like all of you, I wear many different hats. Lots of good hats in this room. But I'm gonna say that in my own way. I wear lots of different shoes. Okay? Yeah. I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I'm a retired military spouse, right? And I'm currently the First Lady of Minnesota, which is an honor also. But more, yeah, thank you. But how I've spent my career is as an educator and a teacher, something I still do to this day. Are there any teachers in this room? Thank you for your work. Thank you for your work, teachers. It is back to school, and we feel that in our bones, don't we? No matter if you're retired or not, you may still find yourself wandering around Target in the pen and pencil aisle. We can't help it, we just end up there. It's like a gravitational pull right around this time of year. And that's how Tim and I first met, and I just want to tell you a little bit about that too. We were both teaching in Nebraska. Do you know what he taught? Social studies, very good. That was your first, that was a little pop quiz there, right? And I taught English. And in the school where we were, that wasn't a school with a lot of money or a lot of resources, they had an old choir room, and they needed the space, so they put a divider right down the middle. And he taught on one side, and I taught on the other, right? There was a very thin divider, and this will not surprise you, but his class was a little louder than mine. There was a lot of energy in that classroom, but I knew right away. And the first thing I knew about him and the first thing he knew about me was that we both believed that education could be transformative, and that's really important because we saw that firsthand. And here's how we partner, because I want you to know this too. There was a young man named Waylon who was on Tim's football team. He was a player. And he was a student in my English classroom that year. And he was brilliant on the football field, but difficult in my classroom. You all maybe know some students like this. Some of you may have been students like that. Maybe? Maybe. But Wayland particularly was reading way below grade level. And he was acting out because he didn't want his peers to know that he wasn't a good reader, and he didn't want me to know that he wasn't a good reader. But in our school at that time, if you were failing a core class, you couldn't participate in sports, right? And you know, football was the reason Waylon came to school. It was the thing that he loved the most. And so I understood that if that was taken away from him, right, like school wasn't going to be a priority for him. So I huddled with Coach Walz, and I came up with a plan. We came up with a plan. And we said to Waylon, here's the deal. If you come in for reading tutoring with me, my name was Miss Whipple at the time, then, and you'd come in before school or at lunch or after school or whenever we would figure it out, but you had to come in and you had to be working hard, then you can keep playing football. And Waylon said, okay. And I knew that was a little bit of a risk, right? Because he was going to have to show me really what he could and couldn't do. But he did, and he worked hard. And Waylon's reading began to improve, and he continued the tutoring even after the season ended. We never discussed it. We just kept reading. Tim would often cross that thin divider in our classroom to read with Waylon. And they would read together, and Waylon would talk about the book he was reading, and Tim would suggest further books to read, and we had conversations about literature and about reading. And more than anything else, Tim cheered him on. That happened off the field. And at the end of the year, Waylon had confidence both on and off the field. He graduated from high school, and he had a chance and a shot to succeed, because you see, Tim and I worked together to see every individual child we could, to meet them where they were, to empower them, and to find a way to value who they were, what they needed, because we believed in them and the power of each and every individual. And we still feel that way to this day, because that's what informs policy making, that's what informs decision making, that's what is involved in service, and that's how you put your lives together. And we're very, very proud of all of our service, both as teachers, in the military, and in every other way we've had an opportunity to do so. And I will put that up against what anybody else has done any day of the week. Tim believes so strongly that every student, every child, every person deserves a chance to get ahead. And he lived that both in the military and in schools and in the rest of his life. And I know that is a commitment that Vice President Harris shares also. And most importantly for us, as we go forth from this convention and do our work, it is a vision that they will fight for every single day in the White House. And as we build this future together, you and I and Tim and Kamala and the people we have served alongside with, and in our communities and in our neighborhoods, we're going to know this. We are building a future for all of us, for each and every one of us, that we can be proud of.
Yes, ma'am.
Last thing I want to tell you about myself is that something my mom always said to me. Now, you don't know my mom, but you know my mom. She is 86. She'll be here tomorrow night, and she's still the church organist, She still gives piano lessons. She's a retired teacher, and she still sometimes substitutes at the school in PE. Yeah. My grandmother just passed away at 104 and a half. So I'm barely middle-aged. But here's what my mom would say to me. She would say, as I was growing up, Gwen, you must do the work that is in front of you. And I thought what that meant at that time was the dishes, right? Right? Or picking up my room or something. But I grew to understand that that was a very profound statement about how one sees life, and it's advice that's both thoughtful and actionable. And what she was asking me to do was to use my own eyes, my own way of seeing, to look at what my service might look like, and to honor the service of what others do and care about. But she was challenging me every day to look at that, to see what was in front of me, and see what gifts and talents I had to offer, and what a difference hard work would make. And it is something that I think about many times a day, so that I might listen and hear each and every individual, and respect each and every individual, and know the true meaning of service, and learn more about it from people like all of you and other people at this convention, because I have much to learn, and so does Tim. We think good teachers are just really good learners. And so we're asking you to join us on that journey. And as delegates to this convention, you already embody my mom's advice. So if you run into her, don't worry, you're already there, right? But we have 77 days, people, 77 days to go, right? Not long. So I am asking you to see this through your own eyes. I am asking you to share that idea and to join together in that idea of what this might look like. We must volunteer, right? We must bring friends. We must donate. We must make calls. We must bake bars for the people who are making the calls, right? We must door knock. We must make bars. I like bars. For the people who are door knocking. Do you all know what bars are? You know, like lemon bars and Special K bars and all those kinds of bars, yeah. Yes. We must do all the things, whatever we can do. Nothing is too small, nothing is too large, and I will tell you, nothing is greater than one other thing, because we need every single person to serve in every single way that they possibly can. And I know this, if we do that together, you, me, Tim, Kamala, all of our friends, our neighbors, people from our past and our present, we're going to win.
That's right.
We're going to win. When Tim ran for Congress in 2006, people were not optimistic. You know, it was a tough district, and we had no political experience per se, except for being carry captains. That was it, signing people up. But we knew we could learn, and they would say to us, what was the last thing you've been elected to? And I would say, well, Tim was the homecoming king. That is not a ringing endorsement for Congress, they felt. But I'm going to tell you this. In 2006, we won a race nobody thought we could win, not even the Democrats at the time, and we won it. And we won that race 5 more times and held that seat for 12 years in the United States Congress. And we voted for health care and all kinds of important things. We were majority makers. And Tim became the ranking member on the VA committee, and he was relentless on that committee, and he fights hard every single day for veterans. And then we ran for governor because we saw that the decision-making was moving toward a state level, and we felt like that was a really important place to serve. And that's why we did it, because we saw that happening. And he ran for governor, and he was elected. And then he ran for governor again, and he was re-elected. We have never lost a political race, and we don't intend to start now. That is right, because this is what we know. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. And when we fight, we win. Thank you for your service, and we'll see you out there on the trail. Woohoo!
Thank you, Mrs. Walz, for your remarks. And next up is one of my big sisters and very close friend, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan.
I don't know if I'm shucking and jiving or encouraging everybody to take a seat so we can hear our next speaker.
Thank you.
Awesome. Here we go.
Well, thank you. So, today is my unlucky day because I started out speaking at the Louisiana delegation breakfast. Yes. And Cory Booker was right before me. And then I come here and Pete Buttigieg and Gwen Walz are before me, and I'm like, that's just not fair. But I am really excited to be here as one of the newest members of Congress. I am Jennifer McClellan from Virginia's 4th District. I was elected, thank you. Thank you. I was elected in a special election last year after serving 18 years in the state legislature. And you know that military families and veterans are extremely important in Virginia. Yes, we are. Yes, you are. Susan Hippen and Tyrone Sims, your co-chairs who are Virginians. And I was so excited and proud to be assigned to the Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee. I am the only Democrat from Virginia on that committee. I am proud to have Fort Gregg Adams, the quartermaster, in my district. I am proud to have in my neighboring district the largest naval base in the United States. And that's right, Norfolk, Virginia. I am proud to have Quantico. I drive past it every week when I go up to Washington. And I thought, these are all new issues to me, but they're not. Because I'm part of a military family. Not directly. My parents were not of they're sort of in between, just a little too young. My dad was a little too young to fight in World War II. He was pretty upset about it. He tried to lie about it, but they caught him. He wasn't a good liar. That's why he became a pastor. But my niece her husband serves in the Air Force right now. And just came back from a deployment in Japan. And I realized when I got on the committee and was in her first hearing and we were looking at the budget, housing, quality housing, access to child care, access to health care, access to mental health services, making sure that spouses have access to the resources that they need to get credentials to get a job. These are all issues I know about. And I was excited to get ready for the first National Defense Authorization Act. I was excited to build on the progress of the PACT Act for our veterans, but I was also, which I know is a different committee, but I was still excited about it, and I was excited to walk into that committee with, we're going to talk about, are we going to give our service members a raise? We're going to talk about, are we going to address the mental health needs of our service members when we're having suicides, a record number of suicides in a small amount of time on one ship? Are we going to address the child care crisis? Are we going to address the health care crisis for our service women and their families who are stationed in states that, since Donald Trump put justices in place that repealed Roe versus Wade, can't get access to health care when they need it if the doctor is afraid they're going to get punished for it? I was excited to talk about how many ships are we going to build. I was told the NDAA, it's usually 14, 15, 16 hours. I was ready. I had my snacks. I had my water. I walked in there. Do you think we debated any of that? No. We debated for 14 hours whether service members should have 2 hours of diversity, equity, and inclusion training. We debated whether climate change has an impact on operations, readiness, and our service members' health. Because my Republican colleagues, landlocked, by the way, couldn't connect the dots. We debated what flags can be flown on military bases. What history can be taught in military schools? What books can be in the library of schools on a military base? That's not what you need us to do. But that's what MAGA Republicans in Congress want to do. And I know you've heard all day about how important it is to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and I can't do any better than Gwen. But I'm going to tell you who sets the tone? The Commander-in-Chief. Not only does the Commander-in-Chief set the tone for what the chain of command does and the rank and file does, they set the tone in the budget, in the priorities that are sent to Congress on what we're going to focus on. But they need partners, because President Biden sent a budget that addressed the needs of our service members and their families. And even some Republicans on the committee that's traditionally bipartisan. This year, the NDAA was called the Service Member Quality of Life National Defense Authorization Act. And then MAGA got a hold of it. And I had to stand on the House floor and explain, as the niece of uncles, 6 of them, who did serve during World War II, but weren't allowed to fight. They were only allowed to cook because of the color of their skin. I had to explain why it's important to create a culture where everybody feels included, to recruit service members and a fighting force that reflects the diversity of the country they're defending. If we have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the White House, if we have Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, and if we continue to hold the Senate, we're not going to waste our time putting politics over people. We're going to fight for you, because you fought for us. Your family members fight for us. You deserve much more. It's the least we can do. It's the least we can do. And you deserve a president who recognizes the sacrifice that you have made. You deserve a president who looks at this flag, which I have flying outside of my office in Rayburn, who looks at this and says, those who are missing or who were captured, who were injured, deserve our thanks and honor, and not to be called losers and suckers. Somebody who recognized when you earn a Medal of Freedom because you put your life on the line for our freedom, that's more important than honoring a mega donor. That's what is on the ballot. But here's what else is on the ballot. The very democracy you fight for, you fought for, or your family members fought for. Because make no mistake, as someone representing the birthplace of American democracy, this grand experiment created by a Virginian, yes, who owned human beings, so he wasn't perfect, and therefore neither was the idea. But the idea was to create a more perfect union of a government by, of, and for the people. And if you don't use your power, and what is your power? Your vote. Your vote is your power. If you don't use it, if you don't participate in this government by, of, and for the people, your perspective is not heard, your needs are not met. That's my cue, it's time to wrap up. So I'm here first to say thank you. Thank you every day for what you or your family members have or continue to do to keep us free. That's right, clap for that. But I'm also here to ask you to do a little bit more. Yes, I need you to vote, but I need you to knock on doors. I need you to make phone calls. I need you to organize your friends. I need you to get voters registered. I need you to ask voters to check their registration, because they're kicking them off the rolls in some states as we speak. I need you to make sure, if you have early voting, that you're voting early so that there is an issue with your registration, you find out, because they're going to try to steal this election. If the margin is big enough, that makes it harder. But I'm gonna close with this. Here's my one regret about being in Congress right now, is I never got to serve with John Lewis. But in his, I've met him, but in his final words to us, he said, democracy is not a state. It is an action that requires every generation to do its part to build the beloved community. And you and your family members have done more than most to protect democracy. But I need you to do your part one more time. And I don't mean like Donald Trump, that if you vote one more time, you never have to vote again. What I mean is, if we lose, this might be the last election you have an opportunity to vote in. So get out like this is the most important battle ever. In Virginia, we have elections every single year, so we always say this is the most consequential election of your lives. This one really is. So thank you for what you have already done, and thank you for what I know you're gonna do between now and November 5th. God bless you.
Thanks, Jen. And next up, my good friend, Congressman Seth Moulton.
All right, as they're running for the exits, I promise to be brief. I promise to be brief. I love my friend from Virginia, and Jennifer's always a strong advocate for Virginia. But as we celebrate all the different ways in which people in our history have contributed to the country that we have today, and she mentioned the slaveholder who helped write our Constitution, I want to just mention the people in Massachusetts who fought to make it possible. They're the ones who fired those first shots. Those are the ones like you who actually put their lives on the line to make possible that writing of the Constitution, what the Founding Fathers did in Philadelphia, and the country that we have now. Now, I wasn't interested in politics when I grew up. I didn't know much about it. I didn't understand why this is so important in people's lives. But when I was serving as an infantry platoon commander in Iraq, there was a day, a tough day, when a corporal in my platoon came up to me and he said, "You know, sir, you ought to run for Congress someday so that this stuff doesn't happen again." Now, he used a Marine term for stuff, but I'm sure you understand what he meant. Now, that didn't convince me to go run for Congress right then. In fact, I came back, went to grad school, took my first job in Dallas, Texas, which if any of you know anything about politics, you generally don't move to Dallas if you want to run for office in Massachusetts. But I thought back to what that corporal had told me. I thought back to the values that we fought for, even if we disagreed with the war, by putting on the uniform of the United States of America. Because in that platoon that I led, and I led a couple platoons in Iraq, there were Marines from all over this country. Marines with vastly different backgrounds, different political beliefs, different religious beliefs. And yet we all came together, put aside those differences to do what's right for America. I mean, isn't that what we should all expect of those of us who go to Washington? I don't think he had any idea whether if I ran for Congress someday, I'd be a Democrat or a Republican. This was the really pre-partisan times when people weren't always attaching labels. We were just proud to show up and serve. But I think he wanted me to run because we learned to trust each other's values. Partisanship shouldn't matter as much as it does. But the reality in this election is that one party has chosen to attack and denigrate veterans. One party is led by a draft dodger who has attacked members of his own party, infamously slandering John McCain for getting caught, calling veterans of World War II losers for signing up and suckers for dying. A man who walked through Arlington Cemetery with his own chief of staff, Marine General John Kelly, and said, "I just don't get it. What was in it for them?" This as John Kelly walked among the headstones that included his own son, Lieutenant Robert Kelly, who was killed in action in Afghanistan. So what does he do? He brings a veteran onto the ticket, and rather than stand up for those values that JD should have learned in the Marines, he's just following in the footsteps of Donald Trump, like so many in the GOP do these days, attacking the honorable service of Tim Walz, who, by the way, he served as an NCO. How many NCOs do we have here? All right. But importantly, how many SNCOs do we have? A few? Senior. Yeah, raise that hand high, because let's not sell Tim Walz short, Master right? Chief. I served in Congress with Tim Walz. He was one of the first people I met because people told me, "You got to meet Tim Walz, Seth." And they didn't introduce him as someone from Minnesota. They didn't introduce him as someone who held a Republican district. They didn't introduce him as a moderate, though he was well known for that. They just introduced him to me as a veteran. They say, "Seth, you got to get to know Tim because he's a fellow veteran." So I hope Tim talks a lot more about his service, about how his service in the Army has informed his service in politics. And I think that we as a party need to talk more about service, about how we are the party that stands up for veterans and military families. And Sue, thank you for being such an incredible advocate for military families in so many different ways. Tyrone, thank you for being such an incredible advocate for veterans. I mean, as a Marine, this guy was in the Army, he's still doing a great job, you know? We have an important story to tell because there is a big choice in this election between a party that stands up and defends our Constitution and our flag and a party that follows a draft dodger to try to tear it down. That is a choice in this election. And the future of our country and the values for which we stand depends so much on that choice. So this is an incredibly important part of the Democratic Party. And my call to you today is to make your voices heard. Just like when you served in uniform, get out there and lead, because it will make our party stronger and it will help us win. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Congressman Moulton, for your remarks and the efforts that you put in, both the ones we see and the ones we don't see, in supporting our veterans, military families, and our military active members. All right, we've got 15 minutes left for my favorite part of our meetings that we have quarterly, and that's the actual work and the things that we do to get Democrats elected to office, from school board to president. And so, Melissa,
Okay.
Vice Chair Membership Recruitment.
Okay, quick story while I'm plugging in here. My mechanic and his wife blew up my cell phone last night. They have never voted Democrat in their lives. And they wanted to know, was Tim Walz the real deal? And I was like, yeah, I think so. You know, Cheryl Pulling is one of our state directors, and Cheryl gives him a thumbs up, yeah. And they were like, okay, we're gonna vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in November. They have never voted Democrat in their lives. They come from a section of Maine that is very rural, very poor. Every day they struggle to make the bills meet. I swear to God, Kamala Harris is gonna score 303 on this election. She is gonna win. Okay, well, I'm trying to get things to work. There we go, and push play. There we go. All right, we're gonna go back and forth a little bit because, you know, I'm an idiot and I didn't print out my speech. And I thought I was gonna talk Thursday, so where's my speech? Oh, I can if I want, thank you. Here we go. All right. Veterans and Military Families Council has been growing over the last 2 years. With this growth, we've done a little restructuring. First and foremost, I need to recognize our intrepid leader, Tyrone Sims, who has performed the works of Atlas, carrying the load. Everything that I report is because of his leadership, and no, I'm not mindlessly sucking up. Others have tried to poach him from us, but he remains our chair. We have lost Jan Donatelli. She was our co-chair. She is finally retired and is enjoying a nice cocktail while we speak, since she no longer has to fly. Our newest co-chair is Sue Hoppin. She joins us as a military family member, providing us with a badly needed voice, expressing the challenges and burdens our families bear as we drag our duffel bags around our country and the world, serving the needs of this nation. Welcome to the team, Sue. Everybody who has given a speech has talked to you about the hard work that needs to be done to win on November 5th. I would like to acknowledge people who have been doing the hard work. I would like to acknowledge Courtney Driver, who is the state director for Georgia. In 2020, she and her people created and field tested a GeoTV strategy that targeted veterans and military families in Georgia. As for the results of this experiment, MSNBC reported on the unusually high turnouts in the counties that surrounded military bases. This led to the elections of Senators Warnock and Ossoff, and flipped control of the Senate in the process. As a campaign manager, you are my hero. Several states have expanded their leadership structures and made great strides for growth. I wish I had time to recognize all. Florida, under Danny Foucault, I apologize if I mispronounced her name, has added a vice chair and 2 in-state regional directors to facilitate growth. Our Democrats Abroad leadership of Key, Adams, and Evans, and Michael Ramos have been working on adding leadership from every country we have military bases in to expand GeoTV efforts of military personnel and our families while serving overseas. They now have groups in 8 countries. And Joe Studler and Ron Healy, our regional coordinators in the Midwest, have gotten both Nebraska and Kansas into our fold. by the way, that was my backyard. Yeah, for real, that's my backyard. I have a flock of 26 wild turkeys that stroll through, and I have a couple of deer. It's kind of fun. Okay, let's start with our leadership. Of the original 5 vice chairs, 5 of them are still filled. Well, finance and fundraising is not filled, but those 5 positions are still active. Tyrone has recently added a union's vice chair, Will Atlig, and his deputy, George Chewing. And we have a PAC liaison, because, you know, those pesky FEC rules. That's Monchi Cherie Dunbar. Job descriptions. I keep telling people that unless we tell folks what our job descriptions are, nobody's really going to understand what we do. So, Otto is the gentleman at the end. He gathers data about and advocates for veterans and military families who are running for federal office. Me, my job is to be cheerleader, guidance counselor, and reference librarian to all the state directors and regional coordinators. Yes, I wave my pom-poms. Rodrigo is no longer in the room unless I'm blind. He oversees our legislation. He tracks and monitors federal legislation around veterans and military families. Yeah, he's the PAC Act dude. Communications is Gabe. Unfortunately, Gabe is not with us this visit because his father is dying. So our condolences to Gabe. Communications facilitates messaging between our state directors, our regional coordinators, the leadership, the White House. He's the little hub in the wheel. He makes sure information goes up and comes down. Unions facilitate networking between union veterans groups and veterans and military liaisons. And our PAC liaison is the way we get around those pesky FEC rules. This is what the country looks like. Those are our 12 regions. Every single region is hopefully a manageable size. No one oversees more than 6 states. Unfortunately, the South is.
So the reason why this is initially when we did, when I created this, Midwest had all of the states you would think of as the Midwest. And so after the 20 election, I said it's too much to manage. It's not fair. Midwest regional coordinator. So I told Melissa, figure out a way to split that up, because to have 10 states or so in under your command control is just too crazy.
So when we divided this, we tried to group people into areas that were sort of like. Socioeconomics, common ethos, along with obvious cultural stuff like the Mid-Atlantic or New England or the tri-state area. We currently have 9 of our 12 regional coordinator slots filled. Ooh, Juan, I apologize. I didn't catch the misspelling of your name. Please forgive me. Autocorrect sucks. As you can, so one of my goals is to finish filling that out. These are the states where we have no presence whatsoever. We do not have state directors. We do not have state party councils dealing with veterans. It's my goal to fill that. I have to what? Oh, yeah. There have been updates since I made the slide. Okay. These are the 8 states in which we have state directors, but we do not have presence on state party websites, nor is a state party have a council or caucus or committee that deals with veterans and military families. And, oh my God, what happened to my little arrow? Sometimes my arrow disappears. There we go. These are our 28 states where we have both state directors and we appear on party websites. This is what we look like overall. We're getting there. Unfortunately, I have failed in certain areas. When I was in OCS, Major Zeik stood before us and taught a leadership class, and he gave us the story of when he was in Florida. And the Pope was visiting Florida, and the general was issuing instructions, you will put so many people on the ground, you will put so many people on the ground, and Major Zeik was supposed to put 178 people from his company on the ground. And he stood up and said, General, I can't do that. General went off on him, ripped him a new one, and then finally got to the point where he said, why can't you do this? And Major Zeik said, because I only have 153 people. And that obviously stuck with me. You have to stand up and say what you're doing right, what your resources are, and where you need help. I have failed. Over the past year and a half, I have been trying to open up communications with Native American tribes. Native Americans are disproportionately represented in the veterans community versus their overall population. Yesterday, I learned that of the invading forces into Iraq in 2004, 10% were Native Americans. However, yesterday I met a really nice woman who organizes Native American activists, and she was kind enough to give me her contact information. And she was going to try and be in the room today, and I don't think she made it, but we're working on it. Part of my job is to take a look at the room and say, who is not in the room? What veterans are not being represented? What military families are not here? And why are they not here? How can we open the door? How can we invite people in? What is the obstacle for veterans feeling like they're welcome? So, in order to facilitate our growth, we have created a support structure. This includes rules and bylaws, a list of military bases in the continental United States, because Courtney's plan was find a base, put them in a minute, draw a 30-mile radius, and that's where you knock, 45? Okay, 45-mile radius, and knock on those doors. And make sure you wear your military garb when you do it. We also have created a state director's binder. When I first found out that the DNC had a council on veterans and military families, I called and I said, hey, how do I get involved? Tyrone gave me a call back a couple of days later. We talked. 45 minutes later, he said, okay, you're my state director for Maine. Oh my God, what was I thinking? Okay. So I got tossed in the deep end, and I had to learn how to swim really fast. That is why I created the State Director's Binder. It simply says, hi, we're here to help you. It is Organizing Veterans for Dummies 101. This is what you do first, this is what you do second, this is what you do third, and fourth, and fifth, and it's up to 18 pages of meticulous detail, including Courtney's GOTV plan. If you got good stuff, share it. We will disseminate it. It allows state directors like who I was, who were tossed in the deep end, to go, oh, I can do this. Like Jordana, who's from New York State, and who's like, what do I do? I'm like, here you go, read this. So we've created a block of resources for people. Here is my goals for 2025. We want to build veteran and military groups in the 15 states where we have zero presence. If you know anybody, for God's sakes, call me, call Tyrone, text us, give us a name, give us somebody we can work with. It's a start. And to fill all of our regional and deputy regional coordinator positions. If you have been a state director and you want to move up, call me. We can make this happen. By 2026 and the midterms, I want to make sure that we have added Native American tribal veterans groups to our council and expanded our structure around Democrats abroad. This includes helping military families register to vote, learning how to fill out those forms, how to get them back in time so they're counted, unlike what happened in 2020. By 2028, I want to fill all 50 states, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and 4 of our 6 territories, those with population. Yes, we have 2 territories that have like 200 forest rangers stationed there. So no. My long-range goal is, how many people have ever used Vote Builder? There is no activist code for veterans and military families. In fact, there are no dedicated activist codes for teachers, for unions, for constituency groups in general. I would like us to find a way to communicate with Vote Builder and get Vote Builder to make those constituency codes set within their back end to make our lives a little bit easier. And my ultimate goal is for veterans to be part of delegate selection plans. You're putting together your delegation, you better have some veterans in your group.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Yes, that really is my backyard. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to speak to me after. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Maurice Hawkins, Virginia delegation. My question to you is, I have a degree in advertising and marketing.
Yep.
I firmly believe in branding.
Yep.
So I think it would behoove this council if we come up, this is what we did in Virginia, this is her idea. Susan Hinton, who's our vice chair in Virginia. I think if we had a brand
Right.
that we could sell
Right.
as a fundraising mechanism for this
Yep.
organization, and we can wear that so we're out in the community knocking doors, making phone calls, and just interacting with people. They know that there's a Veterans and Military Families Council at the national level for the DNC.
Got it.
Exactly.
I will bring that up at our next executive committee meeting and pass that on to our communications person, and I'll nudge Tyrone about that.
You'll have this polo so that you have an example of it.
You're hilarious. But I will have my polo that you forgot. So, meeting's over. No Robert's rules. Thank you for coming. I understand how busy the schedule is for those people who either came late or didn't stay for the whole thing. I understand. So, we are going to be airing a movie called Against All Enemies. It's about insurrectionists, all that other stuff, in half an hour. It was advertised. But anyway, so just letting you know, if you want to come back, cool. If not, that's cool too. Look forward to seeing y'all. See y'all on Thursday. Peace. Oh, I do? I think gavel in. There you go. Democrats.
It's like we need Robert's Rules of Order. Sorry? I saw her a second ago. She's been running in and out. So if you turn around and look right behind you, you'll probably see her go by.
Thank you so much.
Are you waiting for your credentials?
Right.
Oh, just sit your seat right back.
Yeah, he told me too. Like,
Nice to meet you. Oh, very nice to meet you. Have you been having fun?
that's why I see you.
I know, on those little things. This is kind of fun. It's like the energy's amazing. Did you go last night? So are you going to go tonight then to hear President Obama?
Thank you. Hey, Gary.
That was an amazing, like even this meeting, the opening of this meeting, I'm like, oh my God, we have such a lineup for half an hour.
I hope so too.
And I was like, it's Senator Kelly, it's Mayor Pete. It was kind of exciting.
I just figured I was just back to my hotel room yesterday at like 5:30. I woke up at 9:30.
I know, my husband's like, he just left. I'm like, I know, he's here. I sent him a picture, and he's like, you're much closer. Hi, how are you? I know.
Even in Virginia, and you always wonder why.
She's got over 600 volunteers.
You know, we have so many great Air Force friends, and we've been friends for so long, and we just have to agree to disagree and just not talk anymore because I just can't have those conversations. People are like, no, right? People are like, you should really. And I'm like, some people you just.
I need help. Tell them what you need.
In Mississippi.